Hey all, welcome back. Today is May 25th, 2025, and we are going to do our garden tour for May today. The last one was April 29th, I think. And before that, I think it was probably about March 25th, 26th. So right around the last week of the month, we're throwing these things together. And I watched April's this morning with my coffee. And just like the month before when I did the same thing, I am just amazed at the growth that comes in a garden from, I guess, like late March to late May, where those 2 months you have, the day length is increasing, the heat's increasing. We've had a lot of rain actually, but it's been very feast or famine with the rain. But it's all been these converging factors which have led to just an amazing amount of plant growth that doesn't seem possible in late March when you're putting something in, it's a seedling, it's yay big, and you're like, it's gonna be forever before it finally grows. Apparently 60 days is forever because everything out there is looking really incredible. So I'm excited to share. Had a lot of ups, had a couple downs. We'll talk through those as we go. So the strawberries have just been an incredible crop this year. Biggest mistake I made was, honestly, I just planted too many of them. I really didn't know how many plants I needed and how many beds I needed to fill up the freezer while still eating fresh. And I think the answer is going to be I need about half of what I have. So what I'm going to do is, in about 2 or 3 weeks, I'll pull every strawberry bed that I have except for these two. And these two I'm going to let run wild for the whole season, and then in mid-October I'll break them down entirely and I'll create 10 new beds somewhere else in the garden, and that'll be what we're going to have for next year. So I think I had 19 beds this year. I think somewhere between 8 and 10 are what I'm going to have next year, and that should give us plenty. At the end of this strawberry bed, we've got the bolted onions that I still need to do something with. I've been pulling them occasionally, breaking them down into as much food as I can for my breakfasts. It's just kind of disheartening because all the overwintered onions I put in, I probably had 100 and change, and that wasn't even nearly the quantity I wanted. And I'm kind of glad that didn't work out, because then I'd have that many more bolted onions to figure out what to do with. And volunteer lettuce plants, which have served me well because my seed starting for lettuce wasn't good earlier this season. They're starting to bolt now, but they serve their purpose. So I'm really pleased with how that worked out. And now we're coming up to my determinate paste tomatoes. And this is San Marzano. This bed went in a few weeks after these two. I really encourage you, if you want to see some pretty amazing growth, check out my last garden tour video at the end of April, because actually I'll go ahead and flash a picture up now of what these two beds look like, because it just pales in comparison to what it is today. Now you can see we're getting tons of flowers, the fruit's starting to set in here. We're going to be so overwhelmed with tomatoes in about a month, and that's music to my ears, because we're going to take, as a determinant variety, this is a paste tomato. We bring them all in at once pretty much over a 3-week period. We ripen them on the counter, we run them through a food processor, we put them in quart-size Ziploc bags, and they go right into the freezer. And then we eat from that for the full year until the next harvest a year from now. That's worked now 3 years in a row, so I think we've got our rhythm down with that one. I'm really happy with that. This bed was a strawberry bed up until, I think it was right before the last garden tour. I pulled the strawberries because it was a weak bed, and I had another flat of these tomatoes, so they went out into here. And one thing you're going to notice are a few gaps, and that's because these looked a little sickly, a handful of plants, and I pulled them, and it turned out that if you see the defoliation here, I would have typically called that tomato hornworm, but that actually wasn't the case. It was the Colorado potato beetle. He found his way over from my potatoes and decided to hit these, which is not too much of a surprise from the standpoint that it's also a nightshade. The only surprise is I've had Colorado potato beetles every year in my garden when I have my potatoes, and they've never made it to my tomatoes. So that kind of caught me by surprise this year, and it's something I'm going to look out for going forward now, because instead of just roaming my 6 beds of potatoes for the beetle, I now have to roam these beds and my Mexico midgets as well, because one of those plants got pretty worked over as well, and it caught me by surprise. we've got another strawberry bed. And then we've got my pepper bed. This is my sweet pepper bed, and this is YOLO Wonder. In the last tour that I gave, down the middle of the row, I had direct sowed some daikon radish, just to kind of fill out the bed a little bit more, throw some more roots in the ground. It could give me some greens, of which I really don't need anymore because I've got so many greens in this garden. But it was a lesson learned not to do that again because they quickly wound up crowding out the peppers. And one of my themes I'm picking up on this year is something that I'm probably not going to do much of on a go-forward basis, and that is interplanting different types of plants. I think it is something that sounds really good in theory, but the reality is, unless you know truly how something is going to grow and at what rate, you can wind up having one plant really overshadowing another, and that's happened to me in, I think, 3 areas of my garden this year. And I think it's going to teach me that I would much prefer just keeping one type of plant per bed. I'm not worried about the idea of a monocrop because, as you can see, I've got all kinds of plant species within close proximity of others. So having one bed dedicated to one thing, I don't think it's a detriment to the soil or to the ecology. Next door, this is now a lettuce bed at the front end of my cucumber bed. Now, these lettuce were in trays last time we spoke. I got them out finally, and my cucumbers are looking really strong at the moment. I do see some flowers on there now, so we're probably not too far away from having a little bit of fruit set going on. But what I need to do is, within the next week, start a few more seeds of these guys, let them go for a few weeks under cover, and then start transplanting them out here. Now, I know I just got done saying I'm not going to do any interplanting. I'm planting those with the expectation that these lettuces are going to bolt and come out, but I need to stagger start my cucumbers because in the past, my cucumbers have a tendency to throw fruit really aggressively for about 3 weeks, and then boom, plant's dead. So I want to make sure that I have a longer season with my cucumbers because they don't seem to be indeterminate in the way they produce their fruit for me. And this is the second onion bed, and like I said, it's a mess. I don't see this being any fun to work with, other than the fact that I'm going to get some seed. I've never saved onion seeds before, so that's going to be a fun experiment this year. But other than that, I mean, I can break stuff like this down into food. It's just not easy to do. It's just a mess right now with them splitting and bulbing and not bulbing out, and then having the seed head in place. And my asparagus bed. Last time we came out here, the asparagus was huge and toppling over, but the greens were smaller, and now they've bolted for the most part. Everything except red Russian kale. This is a very bolt-resistant variety. It will not bolt even in the heat in my climate. At least not, I've never seen it bolt. The biggest challenge I have is it will get pretty battered by I think it's the caterpillar of the cabbage looper moth. And so probably around late June, I'll just have to go through and pull every single red Russian kale plant that I have out at that point. Because they'll basically just be skeletons. It'll be this all the leaf vein and then nothing else. So it's it's probably my favorite green that I grow because it is so aggressively pushing out growth, but it's going to get destroyed. And I'm just not going to keep it in the garden past June the way I did last year. And then I just had massive caterpillar farms. And if we come down further to the south end, this was a little row that I put in because I had extra greens, and you can see everything grew exceptionally well, but again, everything bolted really aggressively on me except for the red Russian kale. And this green wave mustard doesn't seem to have bolted out yet. I could probably take a lot from him, but again, I'm sitting on so many greens that I can only eat so much by myself, and I have no reason to put things in the freezer from a green standpoint because my beet greens are really stepping up well, and my sweet potato leaves, which are my summertime green as well, they're going to be not far behind. And then the blackberries, they are looking pretty strong. I've I've tempered my expectations on how much fruit I'm expecting to get from these this year. I don't know. Some of these, I've been pulling from my Prime Arc Freedom because they mature earlier, but this is a long branch. I don't know to what extent these berries are going to really size up. I might have said the same thing to myself last year, and then we had a massive haul. So again, I'm still finding my rhythm on blackberries. I just don't know what to expect this year. I still think it's a beautiful stand of plants. I just don't know what's going to go into the freezer. And you can see, this is the Primark Freedom. It's just loaded down with amazing, amazing berries. And I got to get out here and harvest this one today. And I'll show a video in the future about how to identify prior year canes versus current year canes, because that is a big knowledge piece people need if they want to properly manage growing blackberries in the garden. And we got the blueberries. I've got 3 plants of strength. You can see that we actually are going to pull some berries this year at some point when they mature up. This little laggard here is Pink Lemonade. Haven't decided if I'm going to pull the trigger and take him out after this year and start with a different variety, because this one just never stepped its game up. I hate giving up on plants. I really do, but it's just not performing, especially not versus, you know, those 4. I mean, even this one's lagging a little bit, but comparatively, he's well ahead of the Pink Lemonade. So it just doesn't seem like it's a worthwhile investment of space for that plant. And along the western edge, you can see I decided to capitalize a couple of years ago on space here. Actually, I think most of these went in last year, maybe late 2023. They were suckers that I pulled out of the ground from plants in this area and just moved them against here just because I had the space sitting there. It seemed like a worthwhile thing to do to get more food in a small space. And as of right now, despite the fact that I kind of have to do a little bit of a leap over, I don't regret making that decision. Fence is a great way to put extra plants against an area that's going unused, assuming that it's not going to crowd out an existing space. So I think it's working out well for me. And that's exactly what I did with these blue potatoes over here. Unfortunately, they really didn't step up this season. They got hit by the potato beetle as well. I pulled some out of the ground. They're not really good-sized potatoes for eating, so what I may actually do is experiment with the smaller ones and plant them in about a month and see if I can actually get a second harvest out of potatoes. If nothing else, if they grow, but they don't grow great, they can at least provide me my seed potatoes for next year, since I know that when I pull potatoes out of the ground around this time of the year or within the next few weeks, that's a long time to try to store them without a root cellar for seed in the following year. Because when these plants went in, when those potatoes went in, they had 8 to 12 inch long chits. I popped them off numerous times, and the potatoes were getting wrinkled. They weren't robust potatoes, and I think that's what's leading it to being just a lower yielding plant. And honestly, not every plant even came up. For all that I planted in there, I think maybe 2/3 of them actually threw a shoot system. So that tells me that my yields for those, I really needed to temper my expectations, and it really hasn't performed that well. My little raised bed here, which was a bit of an experiment that I just threw together, I actually finally did something with it. I took some homemade compost, I top dressed it, because below that was nothing more than a mixture of deciduous leaf fall with some cut grass from last season. I kind of zhuzhed it all together and put it on top of, which this was just a pathway, so it was just wood chip on top of decayed wood chip on top of native soil. I wanted to build this up because if I ever want a deep tapping parsnip or carrot, this area is tougher to do that in, because this is organic matter decaying on top of kind of a hard, sticky red clay. So it works really well for an annual that only needs about 4 inches of soil to really root well in. But if I really want a good 12-inch carrot or parsnip, I'm going to need something a little built up a little higher. So that was the experiment here. And I direct sowed some daikon radish in here just because I wanted to add some kind of a root to help, kind of feed microorganisms in that area to break down the organic matter so that it becomes more of a planting surface over time. Now behind me here is more strawberry beds, and again, they're going to continue to keep throwing food. I'll keep pulling out of those for when I'm sitting here in the garden working, and I keep having fresh berries. I'll keep bringing more fresh berries inside. But again, the quantity of strawberry plants for me is just beyond what we need at this point. So I can dedicate that space to growing other crops going forward each spring. And then we got my okra bed on the front side. We've got a couple of mustard plants that have, again, I had extra space here, so these went there. I might have harvested some off of one of the plants, and then they both decided to bolt on me. So it's kind of the theme with the spring that we had with brassicas bolting. But the okra plants are going to do just fine. I got a gap there. I've got one plant in reserve that can go in that spot. And this plant here, yeah, I think I might have actually, I might have lost those two and put him in before I had him ready. So that's probably where, that's probably why that was a little further behind. But in the end, I know okra, once the weather tunes up into full-time summer here, they do fantastic. This was a bed of mesclun mix and also a couple of other brassicas that I threw in there. And I was hoping the mesclun mix was going to be very lettuce heavy, and it turned out to be brassica and spinach heavy, along with a little bit of chard. That was disappointing because I really thought that was going to be a lettuce bed for me, but it didn't turn out that way. In the end, it's just a lot of bolted greens. I am still going here. I am finding lettuce plants in there, so I am able to pull from there. But it's kind of just a bed that's going to probably go to the chickens. And here is sort of my unsung hero of the garden, and that's my carrot bed. I worked really hard to get these things going. I thinned, I thought, pretty well. Now that I'm looking at it, I probably could have thinned a bit more. But I'm coming out every morning and I'm pulling a single carrot that has a nice big shoulder so that I'm able to, see how well, and I'm getting, a good 6-8 inch carrot out of it. And the greens are edible, so it's definitely a way for me to keep thinning. But, gosh, I'd love to pull this on camera for you to show you I just don't want to, you know what the heck, let's see what we got. And folks, come on, this is why we do it, isn't it? so that we can pull some food out like this. And this is what I call carrot roulette, because you never know what you're going to get. You can have a really amazing shoulder and then pull out something that's forked or has nothing going on. But I've had the good fortune the last 4 or 5 days to come out here every morning and get something akin to this. And it just brings the biggest smile to my face. This is just the fun stuff. And then I strip the greens down, and the greens are edible. But yeah, this bed to me is just it's going to be one of my pride and joys this year. My sugar snap pea bed was super strong earlier in the last tour, and then it just we had heat, and then dry, and then heavy rain, and it never really bounced back. I still think I have a little bit of a harvest there I can go through, but in the end, this just didn't throw what I was hoping it would throw this spring. We did eat quite a bit off of it for a bit of time, but it just didn't keep going the way I was hoping it would. So hopefully we have a better fall than we had spring with that one, because that's a variety I've done before, and I really was pleased with it. And now here's a bit of a frustration for me is my garlic beds. Those 4 over there, this one here, I really wanted these things to come out by now, because the 4 on the north side, those are my sweet potato beds, and my sweet potato slips are all ready to go. And even this could be a bed of something else. And it was 2 years ago on May 26th, I harvested all my garlic, and there were full cloves formed, but they were a little smaller. Last year I pushed to June 5th. We had a really massive rain right before that, and I wound up with a lot of splitting and issues with it coming out of the ground, so I really didn't want to wait until June 5th again this year. And now we have rain coming up in a couple of days, and I'm really concerned about what it's going to do to these plants, because I'm really not a fan of the foliage health at this point, so jury's out on how they're going to finish. And then this is beet bed number 1, and from the last video, I've already started pulling beets. I'm getting beet greens. This is just phenomenal. I'm such a fan of this crop, because this is not going to bolt in the heat, And to that end, I'm going to basically be able to have beet greens all summer long along with the sweet potato leaves as a summertime leaf for my salads. And this was my braising greens mix bed, which was a brassica mix of kale and mustard, tatsoi, bok choy. And you can see we got a whole lot of bolting going on again with all these. This was an old tatsoi, this was a mustard, another mustard, another mustard. The mustards go, but then you got all this red Russian kale in here that I was talking about before. None of that's bolting. It's getting popped by pests, but it's not bolting, which is just phenomenal because I have an unlimited supply of greens for myself out here, and I'll have that until they finish the plants off. And now here's a bit of a disappointment for me, and it might not look like that through the camera lens right now, but these are my fava beans, and all of a sudden, about 2 weeks after I shot the last update, so it was probably about 2 weeks ago, and it was after a pretty heavy rain, I started losing plants. And as you can see, we are getting pods now, so they flowered up really nicely, and then all of a sudden, some of the plants started dying. And when I started pulling them out of the ground to figure out what was going on, they seemed to barely have roots. So I don't know if it's a pest in the ground, or maybe I put this grass layer down, and not really thick, but I just wanted to, build up the soil a little bit. I wanted to retain a little bit of the moisture because we had some dry spells prior to that. And I'm wondering if it's just retaining too much moisture and I'm getting root rot. I don't know, and I'm a little aggravated by this because this was two beds and they were looking really strong, and it was an experiment to see if I could use this crop, this variety, as a dried legume going forward. And I mean, I don't know. Some of them are throwing some pretty good pods. They had a lot of decent flowers, but all of a sudden, the plant health just started falling apart on me. I think it should have a heck of a lot more of a root system than that. Yeah, that's a bummer. Really disappointed in that, so I don't know what I'm going to do with this going forward. Maybe I'll start with a different variety of fava bean. Maybe I will just punt on the whole experiment and try something else. And then we got strawberries, yet another bed. Going to my point of having just too many strawberry beds this year. Didn't know, happy I learned that from it. And this bed, if you notice, if you saw the last tour, this was a full bed of early globe scarlet radish. And I had a video on that because a lot of those came from the Dollar Tree. It was a bit of an experiment. I wound up pulling all of my radish out of there and getting over 30 pounds of roots. So I've got some in the fridge right now. I've fermented probably 10 pounds, and I've got about 15 pounds in the freezer that are diced up and just ready to go in whatever meal I want them to go into. So that was a huge win. I'll definitely do that again next year. And now we've got habaneros. It's been a while since I've grown a really hot pepper. I love hot peppers. I just don't necessarily love the process of getting them cut up and prepared for use because, latex gloves, you got to use different cutting boards if you don't want to spread a whole lot of heat around your kitchen. But it's the only one I had on hand, and I kind of just had that bug to get something hot in the garden going. And this, for the whole summertime, is going to be a combination of watermelon and cantaloupe. So you can see my watermelon. I got 4 of these. They're doing really well. But I had leftover lettuce seedlings that I wanted to get in the ground, so I put them around this area, and you can see lettuce and spinach. We've got plenty of good edibles in here, which is just fantastic. And they don't really seem to be having too much of an issue with the watermelon running around it right now. I'm hoping that I can get all the lettuce out and consumed before the watermelon really starts taking over, or at least the lettuce should bolt before that happens. Yeah, I'm really happy with the way these are turning out. It just goes back to what I said before about interplanting. Unless you're really dialed into the timing and the growth habit of the plants that you're putting around each other, you can kind of wind up with a bit of a mess. And this is not going to be that, because I think, like I said, the watermelon is going to grow at a rate that's relatively slow compared to the rate at which the lettuce is going to finish and bolt. So it's gonna organically end well for me. And these two over here are my cantaloupes. It is the Hearts of Gold variety, and you can see we're getting some flowers. So I don't think I've ever successfully grown a cantaloupe. I've never really put much effort forth into cantaloupe before. This year, I figure since my soil's nice and mature, I've got a lot of the Bermuda grass out. This would be a good year to kind of tune that back up and see what the end result is going to be. So I'm excited to see how that finishes, because last year I grew watermelon from volunteer watermelons. I have no idea how those seeds got in the garden. And it was really successful, so maybe that inspired me to try the cantaloupe again this year. And then we've got the potato row. So we've got red potato, Yukon Gold, Kennebec, Kennebec. I've got a video series going on my red potatoes. I'll link that above if you want to check that out. I showed myself planting the seed potatoes and month 1 and month 2 progress. So now we're coming into their 3rd month, and I think I'm going to wind up harvesting them sometime around mid-June. I don't know how well we could find these are looking just phenomenal. I've dug around there a bit, and I've felt that we actually do have quite a number of pretty good sized potatoes. And as you can see, this is the end result of the Colorado potato beetle. I have to come out here every day and pick those things off. Yeah, that's just, it's not fun, but I've actually done a much better job this year than last year. Last year, I had a whole lot more defoliation than I've had this year, so that's been really inspiring to know that, you know, when you find that rhythm in a task and you stick with it, it doesn't necessarily feel like it when you're in the moment, but when you look back, you can see the results of that labor. And it's just like keeping up with weeds. Like when I let weeds go, it gets very frustrating to see it overwhelming. But when I keep up with them, even though in the moment it doesn't feel like I'm making progress, when I look back, that consistent habit just yields really good results. And that's what the potato beetle kind of has done for me this year, is I've stayed on it, and I can see now the health of the plant from having that continued labor. And then this is the second beet bed. And if you haven't noticed the theme, I really do love beets. I fell in love with this crop a couple years ago, and coming into last year, I told myself and my wife, I'm like, we are not going to run out of beets this year. I'm like, I'm going to crush beets. And I did, and we did, and it was just phenomenal. So as you can see, you know, I can come out here every day and pull beets, and I can cut beet greens as I want to. And we're going to pause right now because we've got a tractor coming on. Another greens bed. Again, the growth is phenomenal, as is the bolting. So I've got my red Russian kale. The mustard's not going to be edible at this point. The chickens or the compost will get that. And my broccoli bed has been such a win this year. It's Decicio, that's the variety. I've pulled off probably about 15, 20 heads. They're not really big heads, you can see. But you get a lot of side shoot action afterwards. And I cut them, leaves and all, throw them in the Instant Pot in a steamer basket, pressure steam for a minute, quick release, and I'm eating half a pound at a time with these things, and I'm loving every bite. They're phenomenal. I'm thrilled with the variety. I'm thrilled with the cooking method. Everything about it's just been great. And now we've got my bed of Mexico midgets. Now, a couple months ago, this was a raspberry bed that was in place for a couple years. They produced nothing, and then they finally died. I don't know what happened with them. Not going to dwell on it, but I figured this space could be used for this instead. And this is the first year that I'm going to really put a strong effort into keeping these tomatoes pruned. This is an indeterminate variety, which means it's going to grow until it dies. And I mean, like, it's going to die either by pest or disease or cold. But I am working on trellising them up, wrapping the string around, and removing foliage from the bottom up as they continue to age out to try to keep the plant as clean as possible. In the past, I've always kind of gotten lazy with my indeterminate tomatoes, and I wind up with a jungle. I don't want to do that. with indeterminates. I'm fine doing it with the San Marzanos you saw earlier because they are kind of a one and done. They're going to set their fruit and the flowers within a 3-week period, and then they come out of the garden. These go until the end, so I really want to make an effort in keeping them clean and manageable, so I don't wind up with a huge mess in this area. And what I'll probably do, since I know they're going to outgrow this, which is about 5 or 6 feet, when they get to the top, I'll probably just drape the stem over and let it go and have it go down the other side of it. And that way I can keep it clean in the same fashion. I installed this fig. That's a cutting that I took late summer of last year. I nursed it inside. I've got a bunch like that. He just had a nice little root system. It wasn't really filled out, but on March 26th, when I did the garden tour at the end of March, I installed him that morning, and it was a bit of a gamble because I knew he didn't have much of a root system, but he had something, and still looking great. And these are my Aronia chokeberry plants, and they have obviously leafed out, flowered, fruited, and now it's just a matter of waiting for them to ripen on the plant and get it really to a state where it's almost kind of rotting, for lack of a better word, similar to the American persimmon. Otherwise, it's very, very astringent, much like the American persimmon. And this year I'm paying attention more to these plants than I have in the last couple of years, because I think I installed them it was February or March of 2023. And last year, I don't think I paid that much attention to this area. It had a lot of Bermuda grass. You can still see that there is quite a bit of it in this area that I just can't get out among the roots of these plants without disturbing the roots too much. And so this kind of became a neglected corner, but I'm paying more attention this year. And my elderberry, I really did not anticipate these plants getting this size, because these were actually installed when these guys were installed, because I got them from the same place. And I mean, you want to talk about an edible hedge that just grows up like crazy big, crazy fast. This is a two-year-old plant, maybe a 3-year-old, because it was probably in the guy I got it from, a pot over at his place for a year. And yeah, this is phenomenal. All of these are going to turn into like bright little purple blackberries. The birds are going to be ecstatic. I'm going to be ecstatic. It's going to be a happy time up in this area. And I think from a pruning standpoint, what I'm going to do is at the end of this year, when it goes dormant, I'm going to cut these back to the ground. And I'm going to have a lot of wood that I can take from cutting. I could take for cuttings. I could do a lot of propagation there, because I'm going to. I want these all over the place. I may even put a hedge around the property somewhere. I haven't figured out what I'm going to do with that yet. But it's a, yeah, I think it grows. All of this growth a lot of this growth is new growth this year. So I think every other year I'll probably prune it back to the ground and let it regrow. Along the inside of the fence, I have put, I transplanted sunflowers. So what happened was, I had a sunflower probably here last year, and I let it go. It was big, it was massive, it had multi-stemmed, it threw flowers all over the place, and then it dropped its seed. So I had self-seeded sunflowers all over this area, and I wanted to actually put them on the outside of the fence in the pathway in that wood chip. But then I realized I had to put that apron of chicken wire down to keep the skunk out and to keep the groundhogs out. And then I realized sunflowers are deer food, so that they would have munched it as well. So I decided to go ahead and transplanted them on the inside of the fence here. And I'm pretty happy with how that's worked out so far. I've got a rogue onion bed here that may or may not actually finish bulbing up. This is a different variety than the one that I overwintered, and these were actually installed a couple of months ago. They're just not really stepping their game up yet, so I'm not sure what's going to happen. I kind of neglect this area. I do come over and weed it when I'm paying attention, but it just hasn't been a priority for me. And this final strip along the north section are more blackberries. And I don't know why this guy, I just saw him collapsed over this morning. Actually, the whole stem snapped here. So we've had some pretty heavy winds here, and I think this was the end result. Yeah, he's busted up pretty good. That's a bit of a disappointment, so I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with him next. That's a project for off camera. And in the last video, I noted that a couple of my blackberries, this one and this one, they kind of died back because what I did was I cut back the floricane from the prior year because I wanted to let all the energy go into the roots and the primocane this year. And these two didn't respond to that, but the rest of them did just fine. So, but you can see that they had other canes that were ready to come out of the ground, and they've established just fine. So I think those plants are going to be good. But it was surprising to see when I took the floricane out a month ago that these guys kind of died back a little bit. But all's well that ends well on that front. But yeah, this is going to be a whole other stand of blackberries. And I'm going to keep it nice and tight and managed, nice and small plants, because I don't want to deal with trellising on this area. But I still might have to do that based upon the fact that that other guy collapsed on me. That's a bit of a bummer. But that's the, you know, when you step back and you look at it, I've got to always keep perspective for myself that when I have incidents like that that kind of irritate me, I've got to take all of this into perspective, and I need to stop seeing the garden for what it isn't, and I need to start really appreciating it for what it is, because I have a bad habit of seeing the work out here and seeing the weeds and seeing the bolting instead of seeing the growth and seeing the harvest. Because if somebody else showed me this garden as theirs, I would be in awe of it. But when I see it as mine, I have a bad habit of seeing the imperfections. And I need to really start focusing on what is really going right instead of just dwelling on what's going wrong. So that, folks, is the 2025 May garden tour. I would encourage you, if you have time, to go check out the April garden tour. I'll go ahead and link that above right here, only because if you're looking to get into the garden game and you're curious about what can happen in, gosh, less than 30 days time, because that was the 29th of April and today's the 25th of May, it happens so quickly with these annual crops. Once the weather tunes up, and it really doesn't seem like it when you're in the moment and things are small, but not even that much patience required, and you can go from very little to a whole heck of a lot. So check out that video if you got a moment. I think it's worth seeing the month over month comparison. And until next time, appreciate you watching. Take care.